Welcome to the EchoCast, episode 63. I am Bon Diesel, your host, your hostess with the mostest, or the mediumist, or the leastest. I don't know, whatever. This is a Division 2, for the most part, podcast. We talk about Division stuff. We talk about Division community. And this week we're going to talk a little bit about E3. So today, we will have State of the Game recap, new specialization, talk a little bit about the 3.1 patch and title update for possible changes, PTS, all that good stuff. Some E3 hopes, a Ghost Recon Breakpoint mini rant, and banning in the division, as well as a couple listener questions. So if you want to support, if you want to help out, if you want to give me an excuse to pay Diesel to continue doing this stuff, and support some other stuff I do, check out patreon.com/theechocast and gain some exclusive rewards and early access to this podcast when I record it on time and other content. Okay, so State of the Game recap. This week we had Hamish and the lovely Frederick Thylander. Frederick talked a lot about the new gunner specialization. It uses a new minigun, and the idea of it is to fulfill kind of a power fantasy of just standing up and tanking damage and firing a giant gun real fast. I haven't played the PTS, but from what I've seen, it fulfills that pretty well. The minigun is the game's first heavy weapon, as Thylander talked about, and what's unique about it compared to every other gun in the game is it cannot be fired from cover, and you can't sprint while you have it out and equipped. The specialization also gets a bonus that's like a pulse-ish effect. That's kind of a wedge in front of you, and depending on whether it's NPCs or other players, like in PvP, it either disorients or confuses them. For the PvE, it basically gets enemies out of cover so you can melt them down. The extra little thing about this new specialization class, which is called the Gunner, is that you get a riot foam grenade. So there you go. That's the new specialist. That seems like it's one of the big things that's in the PTS and that they're testing for 4.0 for title update 4. One big thing they talked about around this time was about how feedback is great. But it really needs to be posted on the forums if you want it to be tracked and really checked out by the devs and stuff like that. On the forums, on the official forums, they have a system where when you put in something, it goes to a queue and gets looked at and prioritized and stuff like that. If you send stuff to them on Twitter, Reddit, Twitch chat, they may notice it. It may creep into the back of their heads, but there's no like official way to make sure that actually gets seen and gets looked at. So if you just have an opinion, any of those routes are fine. But if you really have a bug or a significant issue, or even just ideas about balancing and stuff like that, the forums really are the best place. They did make a big change in the PTS and potentially with the live game to skill trees in general, where now like damage and bonuses for different types of guns I'm really sorry, I keep coughing, are not stuck to certain specializations and certain weapon classes anymore. In theory, you can use any weapon with any specialization now, though there will still be little extra bonuses, such as like one specialization may have a attachment that works best for one type of weapon, but like the scopes and stuff like that. The signature ammo is getting a big change, where now in the current game it just kind of randomly drops and it doesn't really seem to make any sense. In the title update 4, we're expecting to have a signature ammo bar. It's a series of hashes beside your UI that, and as it fills up, once it fills, specialization ammo will drop. So you're going to be able to see like, oh, hey, some ammo is about to drop, and you'll know what's going on. This will be impacted by you killing enemies, using your skills, accomplishing different things. But when you're in a group, your teammates will also help you gain. And I believe there's even some skill tree stuff that is incorporated into that, where your teammates can do specific actions that will give everyone else more progress towards getting specialization ammo or signature ammo. I think that's a really good thing. I think having a very clear indication of what's going on with that is really important, and I think it's going to improve the experience quite a bit. Speaking of improving the experience, the TAC-50 and crossbow are both going to receive significant buffs in damage. The crossbow specifically seems like it's going to get a buff in armor damage. So it's a go-to to knock off armor off of like big heavies and stuff like that. They notice that the minigun and the grenade launcher are quite a bit more powerful and useful. They want to bring that in line. And in case anyone's playing the PTS, that change is not included. So if you use the TAC-50 right now, it's still pretty weak. But they're expecting to make it much more useful when title update 4 comes around. They did talk about how they are really invested in making skill builds more useful and impactful. They want to make them as easy of a choice as a DPS or even a tanky build, which is getting more popular. They also reinforced again that there are PvP changes coming, and they want to make that experience more significant and more fun for people. But they didn't give any clear details, and I'm kind of wondering if that's going to be a later date type of thing, but we will have to wait and see. They did, Thylander did specifically talk a little bit about some pieces of exotic gear people are finding. I believe that you can find blueprints for it in the game, in the PTS, and apparently there's a holster. He talked about knee pads, I think, but I don't think anyone has found those, so he may have let loose maybe a little detail, or maybe not. I have no idea. And yeah, so I'm excited. That's fun. The idea of maybe having some exotic gear. I believe the holster that has been found gives some pretty big bonuses to using a pistol, and may make using a like a pistol build way more viable. And that was about it. So this one wasn't super crazy, but it was another kind of a deep dive with a dev. This is a dev that should be familiar to most people, at least most people who were involved in the first game. Frederick is great. I speak to him relatively often, and I actually got to meet him at E3 last year. So shout out to all the Ubisoft Star players. Have fun. I very much enjoyed my trip last year, and I'm very jealous this year. The Frederick's really cool, and I really enjoyed my time getting to talk to him and kind of hear a lot of his justifications and thoughts and stuff like that about decisions they made in the first game, and even getting to hear some stuff about what they were going to do with the second game, since we are under a lovely NDA. I think that the improving of the specialized weapons is a big deal. It's almost kind of a meme at this point that the specialization weapons are kind of useless. The grenade launcher is pretty good, but I mean the crossbow is pretty anemic, and the TAC-50 is significantly worse than the Nemesis, the exotic rifle. So it shouldn't be that way, and it seems like they're going to address it, which I think is really important. The big mod changes I forgot to even mention was how there's no longer generic mods won't work on the high-end gear anymore. So for everyone who leveled up a level 19 character and farmed, unfortunately that's no longer a thing. But they are changing the mod system where they don't have like the protocol mods and stuff like that, where if you have a blue mod, it will fit into a blue slot, and it even appears that on the UI, when you're in the overall view of your build, you can see what type of mods you have as well. So if you have, a talent on a gun that only can use so many mods of a certain type, you can see where they are, and you can kind of fool with it that way. But yeah, making it so, blue mods go in blue spots and red mods go in red spots, and not having this kind of overly convoluted system, I think is going to be a really nice change for most people, and will make more builds a little more viable. And then knowing that there's new gear coming, stuff like that. I really hope that there's more, more things with, I hope for some new guns. I may or may not have, chirped into an ear and said, hey, everyone misses the lightweight M4. I'm glad that the lightweight M4 and the LVOAC are rifles. I think they're fine there. I'd like them to be a little more useful, but I get it. But give us like a, if you ever notice that the M1A, I think the MK16 have like a SOCOM variant. So I was like, hey, maybe throw us a SOCOM variant of an M4, fully auto, something like a P416, but, more of the look of a M4 like we think of when you type in, like Navy SEAL M4 or something. It's what everyone thinks of. It's the Call of Duty 4, M4 that the spec ops M4 that everyone thinks of. So I think that'd be really cool. I know we got an M4 with the raid as a reward. It's a little goofy for me, the eagle and all that. It's neat, it's a cool gun, but I want some kind of cool, like, gritty looking lightweight M4 that we can deck out with attachments and stuff. So we'll see if that finds its way through. But good state of the game. I'm glad they're keeping up with them. Getting devs on there, I think, is really important. It puts faces to names and faces to decisions. And while it may not always result in fun interactions, I think it is good for people to see who these people are and maybe, get real crazy and remember that they are people. For Division news, I have kind of a mix. It's mostly just talking about my kind of final E3 predictions and hopes. You'll probably hear this after E3 has started, and I won't record another one until after it's over. So from Division 2, I'm really hoping that we get a pretty significant tease and maybe even a deep dive into the first DLC. I think that one thing to remember is that with the DLCs with Division 2, it won't be like Division 1, where with Division 1, it was just kind of like, the first DLC is a mode. So whether it was survival or underground or whatever, it seems like these, at least the way they've portrayed these DLCs for Division 2, is it's going to be like almost like a feature set. Like, here's a new mode, here's a new map area to play in, here's new gear and weapons, and here's some new story missions, here's some more lore. We're pushing the story forward. I think we're gonna see like the castle settlement return as a settlement, and I assume we'll have to do some story arc to get people back in there, which I think would be really cool. So I just hope that we kind of get, at least a very, subtle dive into all of that stuff. And I don't expect that we'll hear about that until Monday when they do the Ubisoft conference, but we'll have to wait and see. For Xbox, as someone who's an Xbox fan, I'm really excited to see, obviously, stuff about the next gen system. I more than likely will buy one, probably the day it comes out. And I'm really excited to hear about some exclusive games. I'm biased, so I understand if you're a PlayStation player and you don't agree, or if you're a PC player and you don't care about the conversation. But I really do think Xbox. I think Xbox is the significantly superior system in every way but exclusive games. But I think exclusive games are probably the most important thing when you're deciding which system to buy. So there's a good reason why the Xbox has sold, I think, like 40 or 50 million Xboxes in this gen, and I believe the PlayStation 4 has passed 100 million. So they handily smacked Microsoft this time, and I think that the main reason is just the games that you can only play on PlayStation are amazing. There's 10, 15, 20 of them. And the exclusives for the Xbox One, I almost can't think of any besides like Halo, and Halo 5 was kind of universally lauded for not being that good. I don't think Gears is as big of a pull as people think it is anymore, or as it used to be at least. So I think Sony very handily won this gen, and I really would like to see Xbox finally push back. They've bought a bunch of big new studios. They should, this E3 needs to at least show like, hey, here's 4 or 5 exclusives that you are gonna really want an Xbox for. Now, what I'm really curious about, and it kind of blends into that, is XPlay, and if they're going to talk more about it. because we have the Stadia, it was had their big show, and people are having all those arguments now about whether or not the Stadia, that whole deal is going to be useful for most people. I'm not a big fan of that whole system. I don't see myself enjoying that experience, even though I have like a really good internet setup. But what XPlay is interesting for me is that it seems like Xbox is really making a push that your Xbox, and if you have a PC, it just really feels like they're going to try to blend those two worlds, which for PC players is a big deal because Sony is not going to put their exclusive games on the PC. You aren't going to play The Last of Us 2 on PC. At least I highly doubt it. So as good as the PlayStation exclusives are, there's a large player base that won't ever get to touch them on PC because they don't want to play on console, and they aren't going to come to PC. So if games like the new Halo Infinite, if the new Gears, if any new Forzas and stuff like that are really, really good, you're going to be able to play them on PC. And hopefully there's cross save and stuff like that. Like for me, I would love to be able to sit down on my laptop downstairs and stream my Xbox to that and play while I'm hanging out with my wife. And then when she's busy or gone, I can come up to my computer and play it in even better fidelity. Or if I'm at work on lunch break and then we have a decent internet connection, I can pull out my phone and pull out a little controller and knock out some dailies on Division 2 while I'm at work. That kind of stuff. I'm not really sold on Stadia because at the end of the day, it's just a new platform. The idea of XPlay for me, for someone who has PC and Xbox, if it really does create one ecosystem of being able to play games on PC, play the same games on console, and play the same games streaming off-site, I think that's a big deal, and I really hope that we get a whole lot more information about that. From Ubisoft to Beyond Division 2, I hope that we hear about some things that aren't expected quite yet. A few things have leaked, so I'll try to leave that out. Everyone wants Splinter Cell. Apparently there's like a Breath of the Wild type game that's supposed to be coming out, so I'm curious about that. So Breakpoint. So before I recorded this, I noticed that there were a few videos that appear to, be legit, and it looks like, they have to be allowed under NDAs and stuff like that. So I can't talk about the alpha test for Ghost Recon Breakpoint. There's a 5-year NDA on it, and that's that. But what I can talk about is things I've seen in gameplay now that they've released. And the one thing I'll focus on is if you watch that gameplay, there's health bars, which seems to indicate that they've made Ghost Recon into like an RPG. And like, I wasn't a big fan of Wildlands. I thought it was way too goofy, that they casualized it a lot, that it just didn't feel like a Ghost Recon game to me. I've been playing Ghost Recon since before it was Ghost Recon. The first Ghost Recon was really kind of a mod for the old Rainbow Six games. Or not a mod, but like a side project, or it's hard to say what it was, but it was really cool. And where old Black, I was going to say Blackthorn, which is an old Rainbow Six expansion. But the old Rainbow Six game was a highly super tactical, mostly PvE experience, but it did have PvP as well. But it was always like you were a SWAT team going into a building, saving hostages, killing terrorists, and that was it. Where the first Ghost Recon took that idea and expanded it into big open fields and vehicles and rocket launchers, and it just made it bigger. And so I played the Ghost Recon games through that all the way to Future Soldier, which is probably still my favorite Ghost Recon, even though I've really enjoyed all of them. I thought the Ghost Recon Advanced Warrior games were actually really hard, and while I enjoyed them, they probably weren't my favorite just because I wasn't. They were just hard. But Future Soldier to me felt like a really good balance between hard and tactical and fun. If you ever get to play Future Soldier, or if you ever did, and you're a Division fan, which I assume you are if you're listening to this, Ghost Recon Future Soldier, which was made by Red Storm, and it was basically a precursor to the Division. The way the skills work, the way the cover system works, even the the gunplay and stuff is just so similar. Even just the movement of the characters is so similar, and you can definitely see Red Storm's influence in that. And I don't know if they actually did have influence directly, but man, it sure feels like it. So then Wildlands came out, and it was no longer Red Storm because Red Storm was on The Division. So they gave it to Ubisoft Paris, and it just feels like Wildlands to me always just felt like what someone who never really played Ghost Recon would think Ghost Recon should be if you made it open world, which the old ones weren't. And it just isn't. It was a bummer, and I really hope that Breakpoint was going to maybe take some of the advances, the open world and some of that stuff of Wildlands, and turn it and push it maybe back towards Future Soldier a bit, feeling a little bit more gritty, a bit more realistic, a bit more that style. And from what we've seen in these trailers, I mean, obviously, the gameplay footage that they're going to allow everyone to see is, going to look good, of course. But doing things like health bars, I want to be real careful about what I talk about, but that going that direction, making it less realistic, making it, doing that kind of thing, I think that's just a bad idea. And what really annoys me even more so is that first trailer they showed for the game, which was, quote unquote, gameplay footage, was not. I mean, it was, I'm sure it was in engine, but they made that first trailer that came out made it look like it was going to be this gritty, realistic game again. And at least from this little thing that we've seen, this, 10-15 minutes of gameplay footage, it really just goes back and it kind of seems like they're just going to double down on taking the game even less seriously than Wildlands. I hope I'm wrong. I'll play the beta, and if I'm wrong, I'll change my mind, and I'll toot a different tune. But Breakpoint, I'm afraid it's gonna be a bummer, man. And just because the guy from Walking Dead is in it, and he has a real deep, raspy voice, hopefully there's more story in this one, because the story in Wildlands was garbage. It was just the least interesting thing I've ever experienced even worse than like Division and stuff. An actual in-game gameplay storytelling, in my opinion, is just rough. So I'll be curious to how that goes. I have to say my hype has been broken quite a bit on Breakpoint, but we'll have to wait and see. I'll try not to do a final judgment until I get to touch it in the beta phase. Some other things, Age of Empires 4 is actually something I'm really hoping we hear some from Microsoft. Age of Empires is one of my oldest gaming loves, right up there with Rainbow Six and stuff like that. Anno 1800 by Ubisoft came out recently, and it's really, really good, but it's a little more in depth than Age of Empires probably will be, where Age of Empires is just kind of pick it up and play, and Anno 1800 is like, 15 hours later, you're still building your town, and you don't know what year it is anymore, in the best way. So if it means anything, Age of Empires, I had almost 5,000 hours in Division 1. I can almost guarantee that Age of Empires, I have way more hours than that. It's also been out a lot longer, but Age of Empires 2 was my thing. So obviously there's tons of other games, and there's lots of other stuff that's going to happen at E3. I'm excited about all of it. At the end of the day, even when there's stuff that I don't personally care for, or I'm not really that interested in, I still really like seeing all this stuff, because you can really kind of gather where the industry's going and stuff like that. I think that the industry is going to push really hard this whole streaming future and stuff like that. I really think that's going to end up being one of those. I'm afraid that streaming video games is going to be the 3D TVs of this gen, where everyone thought that every TV was going to be 3D by 2020, and now I don't even know if they sell 3D TVs anymore. Because you had to wear glasses, and there was all this like side stuff, and it wasn't really as good as everyone kind of made it out to be, and it wasn't really accessible for everyone. And I have a feeling this Stadia thing is going to be something similar, but I also believe that it is going to push games forward. I saw an article today that basically said Microsoft and Xbox are going to work together on this infrastructure stuff so that they can fight off Google and Stadia. So if Google can do this project, even if they don't stick with it, and make Microsoft and Xbox work together, or Microsoft and Sony work together in a gaming way, I'll take that as progress. There. there's that. And here's the smooth transition into mid-roll time. Okay, so for a couple community topics and discussion, then we'll do some questions and I'll wrap up some content updates. So the title update 3.1 rollout, it seems like overall the patch has been good. I've seen reports, people talking about the AI still doesn't seem right and stuff like that. They did say it wouldn't be completely fixed, quote unquote, until title update 4. I felt like it was fine. I didn't notice, enemies blindly running straight past me to try to get behind me and stuff. I haven't played a ton, but I've put in a few hours and I haven't noticed anything too awful, but that may just be because I haven't played enough. It seems like a good step towards title update 4. They're getting things worked out. I really do think that they've been really clear with us. I think if you look at the way that communication happens and basically every other game, I think the only game that really does communication better than The Division is probably Warframe. And if you know anything about their structure, the way that their whole thing works is, of course they do, because they're basically independent and they publish themselves. Kind of the way Destiny is starting to look a little bit, even though I still think they're not quite as transparent as maybe they will be in the future. And so I think they're acknowledging a lot of things. It kind of grinds my gears a little bit. I see a lot of people talking about like they're ignoring PvP, they're doing all this stuff. They're not ignoring it. I see them acknowledge that stuff all the time. Just because they don't have the golden goose answer for you yet, doesn't mean they're ignoring what's going on. It just means they just don't have an answer yet. And when they do, I'm sure they'll be happy to give it to us. So that's just kind of my outlook on it. But I understand not everyone's gonna feel the same. But I do think people have a good point about PvP being borderline dead at this point. I'll still argue till my grave that I still think PvP in this game has way more potential than the first game ever had. It's really kind of annoyed me. It's kind of nipped at me to see people already asking for things like burst healing to be back, and because apparently that meant that people had skill or whatever. I think that they do need to stick with it, with their vision of what PvP is going to be in this game. But I also think that they need to realize that right now, and I think they do realize that PvP isn't like even like attractive to anyone at this point. People who are in the PvP and people who aren't, and I think that there should be some goal to get both of those people into it, ideally. And I've seen complaints about loot and just the grind in general and builds and stuff like that, and I think I have good reason to believe they understand that those things aren't great. They acknowledged it in the state of the game this week, and I think they're gonna make a push towards that. There's things like it is a weird situation where, like, I will still argue that the Division 2 is a better game than the Division 1. I talked about this last week, so I won't go deep into it again, but I think it's like kind of weird to not at least agree with that. That said, despite the fact that there's way more things to do, there's way more variety of things to do, between the contracts and all that stuff, there's so much you can do, but it does feel like there's like something missing, like, and it's hard, I'm not smart enough to put my finger on it. But I play almost every day, but I don't play every day for 3 or 4 hours. I play every day for like 30 minutes to an hour, to knock out some projects and get some blueprints, maybe knock out a couple missions, maybe take some screenshots and stuff like that. But I'm definitely not investing the time like I was. I'm also really busy with other stuff, so I don't think my experience is necessarily representative of everyone. I think I have over 250 hours already, which is not very many compared to some, but probably a lot more than many. And I really do think they have their finger more on the pulse of how people feel than maybe they get credit for. I get why maybe people don't always feel that way, but if they spent every stay of the game and every waking moment on social media, acknowledging every single person's concerns and complaints, nothing would ever get done. So I think 3.1 was a great step. I'm really excited for 4.0. I'm curious to if 4.0 is the next DLC or if that's going to be like a title update 5. We'll have to see. I suspect that it will be different. It'll be separate so that they can get title update 4 stuff out, and then whatever crazy stuff they're going to introduce in title update 5 or with the first DLC, things will be kind of leveled out, and then we get some new content. So we'll have to wait and see. The second little topic here is talking about warnings and bans. As we know in 3.1, if people were using the armor glitch, they received like basically a warning from the devs saying, hey, if you abuse any glitches or if you do anything ever again, you will be banned. So I think that's good. You know, there was the armor exploit that was going on before 3.1. Supposedly there's another exploit that's out there right now. I won't go into it because I don't think it helps anybody. Like, I get why, if your experience has been ruined by people doing this stuff, you want them banned, you want them gone forever, you want them, you know, their account removed, you know, take their $100 and throw it down the drain. The problem is with a game like Division is that, while I get that lust for blood, it's not a competitive game. And if you look at the history of how they've treated, you know, cheaters and exploiters and stuff like that, cheaters, as far as we know, they've banned a bunch of them. You know, they don't release those numbers, so we aren't positive. But exploitation of things, I mean, I've said very clearly that I would love to see people get punished really severely for, you know, exploiting loot caves and stuff like that. So that turns into a situation I talk about a lot. You know, what do we want and what do we actually expect? So what I would like is for when people exploit the game, that they get relatively severely punished for it. What I expect is for them to be warned lightly. And the reason I expect that is because that's the way that they've always done it, especially with exploits. So yeah, sure, I would love to see people punished severely, but I'm also not going to throw a fit when they aren't, because that just has never been Massive style. And I think it's fine to express your opinion about that, but to, you aren't going to tell them what to do. You can be rest assured that they will not do what you want them to do just because you say so. So, I think that's kind of an interesting thing. I think that's a way to, something to think about when you see this stuff. Hopefully they're figuring out some of these exploits and stuff like that. And I mean, it does seem like they've been faster to react with a lot of it than they were in the first game, but it's just, until you have millions of people playing the game, it's just hard to find all those things, and then it takes time to fix them. So if you find stuff, or if you know about stuff, tell the people who need to know. We have 2 listener questions this week. We have one from Nitro that says, if you were to create another game inside the Tom Clancy universe in a different game genre to the ones that exist to date, what genre would you choose and where would it be set? So this might not answer your question as exactly as you would like, but one game I've always thought would be really cool in the Tom Clancy universe would be a Division game, go figure, but it would be in a turn-based style of XCOM. And the reason I think that'd be cool is because I've watched that game be played quite a bit. I've actually never played it, but I've played games that are similar. Ubisoft actually has a game like this. That's the Mario and Rabbids game. And with the Division, with the cover system, with the way that works, with the team-based stuff, with the skill usages and the gun usage and all of that, I think you can make such a cool turn-based game with the Division as a base. So I would love to see something like that. Another idea I had was something along, I would love to see a real-time strategy again come from Ubisoft. They used to have World in Conflict, which was a really cool one back in the day, and I would love to see them do that again. Now, I talked about Anno 1800, but that's almost like The Sims. Not really, I don't know. That's more of like a city building game that happens to have combat mechanics. I would like to see a straight up, medium paced, build your city or build your castle or whatever, something from basically a World in Conflict, but in the Tom Clancy universe. So this time you're using tanks, and there's some big conflict in a Tom Clancy type of story that is bigger than just a squad of soldiers fighting in the shadows. So real-time strategy, turn-based fighting, I would like to see it. Would I even play it? I don't know, but I think those would be 2 kind of cool things to see. Seamaster asked, I know it's a long way until Division 3, yes, but what city would you like to see as the next location? So my answer is that I would wonder if a Division 3 is even going to just be based in one city. It's going to be on next-gen hardware, in theory. There should be more capabilities and more to do, and more that's able to be done. And I will say, before I answer like a location, is I initially resisted this idea, and I've actually come to the point where I'm all in now. Whether it was a spin-off or if it was a straight Division 3, I would actually be okay if they gave it the Tomb Raider treatment, if they gave it the Last of Us treatment, if they made it just a straight up single player game with like a 30-hour campaign where it's all highly, there'd be some maybe open world elements, maybe there'd be some, lots of, ability to still make your own choices, maybe even select your own gear and have still some of the RPG elements. But man, I would love to see just a straight up really interesting single player story come from the Division rather than be so worried about in game. That said, I'd be really interested to see what they would do with the two other locations. So when they picked DC, they actually had in mind Seattle and New Orleans as well. Both would be really cool. Seattle would be interesting just because of a new setting in the West Coast. New Orleans would be interesting because if you remember, Division 1 was highly, a lot of the issues that New York City had in Division 1, they learned from Hurricane Sandy, which was a hurricane that hit New York City directly, which almost never happens. And with New Orleans, a similar thing happened back in the day when a hurricane hit New Orleans directly and broke a bunch of the levees, and the city's still recovering from it in some ways. And so they would be able to have a lot of inspiration to what would happen in New Orleans if it went down. New Orleans also is just, it's a much different place than DC and New York City, and I think they could do some really, really cool stuff. And the little bit of concept footage we saw was really, really cool. Beyond that, there's some coastal cities in California I think would be interesting. Something that's interesting about like New York City and DC is that they both go through extreme weather, and things can get really rough. Well, if you think about like San Diego or San Francisco and places like that, they don't go through those extreme bouts of weather, and in some ways living would be a lot easier there, even through one of these crazy conflicts and mass disasters. So I think that'd be interesting. And then Chicago's always going to be something I would love to see. It's a local city. I live within a day's drive of Chicago, and you could almost bring back that New York feel. You could even do it in winter, bring back the snow. But really have it in a new place. Like, I can't imagine. It'd be so cool to explore like Lincoln Park in a Division game. So yeah. So there's your answer, Seamaster. Thank you and Nitro very much for asking. If you have any questions, feel free to drop it either in my Discord. There should be a link. You can ask me on Twitter. You can ask me on the YouTube comments. You can DM me on Twitter. Whatever. Just let me know if you have questions or topics. Happy to answer them. A couple of content updates. We will be doing a Baby Diesel shower stream. I figured out how to make an Amazon wishlist work, so we'll throw some stuff on there if people want to participate and hang out. I'm trying to figure out 2 or 3 different games that her and I can play either together or against each other. She's not a huge gamer, so we'll have to find something that will be fun for both of us and relatively easy for her to pick up. So be on the lookout for that. I'll announce it. We'll probably do it in like early July when she's like really ready to pop. I'm really trying to get back to doing more streams during the weekdays. It's been kind of a weekend thing right now. If you're listening to this the week of E3, I am going to stream the Xbox. I'm going to try to stream the Ubisoft broadcast and kind of give my live reactions to those and what happens in them. I'm just busy. Tuesdays I play volleyball. Wednesdays we have childbirth classes, and we're doing that. And then Mondays, Wednesdays, or Mondays, Thursdays, and Fridays, I've been trying to keep up with games a little bit, record the podcast, but I'm also trying to get our baby's room ready, get the rest of our house ready for the baby to come. And it's just I'm kind of stretched thin right now, and I hope to get back to a normal eventually, even though I suspect, especially once the baby comes, it's going to be more about finding a new normal than getting back to the way things used to be. And anyone who's a parent is probably laughing and smiling right now because they realize that I have no idea what is about to happen. And that's fine. So to wrap it up, if you like the podcast, please follow on whatever platform you're using. If you're on iTunes, please rate the podcast and leave a review. If you check it out on YouTube, please follow the channel, subscribe, like the video, comment down below with questions or comments or whatever. I am on Twitch, where I try to stream multiple times a week, and I'm on Twitter, both as Bond Diesel, where you can also find a bunch of other stuff I do and like to share. And that's it. So, until next time.